So there I was, staring down a massive golden dragon on the edge of the battlefield. Its tough claws had already ripped through the landscape, turning once vibrant forests into mere scars within the dirt. Our adventuring party had been fighting this thing for roughly 3 hours at this point, and those of us who hadn't been taken down already were quickly waning in strength. If this battle was going to finish anytime soon, something had to change, and that something was me. I called over my ally, the paladin Naona, and quickly relayed my plan to her. I had an incantation which would be able to stop the dragon's movements entirely, which would allow our warriors to go in and slice through the areas on its body it had been defending up till now. The plan was dangerous, of course. It would require Naona to take the brunt of the action as she distracted the dragon. Her enchanted shield was completely in the line of fire. And if I got down before I was done casting the spell, then all of us would likely be done for. But Naona and I weren't worried. We had been through many different trials and tribulations together as an adventuring party and faced impossible foes before. She gave me a nod of affirmation and ran off, yelling at the dragon to get its attention and putting up her enchanted shield. Meanwhile, I stood there, beginning to incant the words inscribed in my mystic spellbook. I had my doubts, I'll admit that, but it worked perfectly. With Naona's strong defenses and my friend Roslina helping both of us up by healing us, I managed to say the last word of the incantation just in time, causing the dragon's movements to stop entirely. Without hesitation, our remaining warriors rushed in, swords ablazing, and sliced through the tough hide of the beast, ending the battle once and for all. You might have thought that the story I just told you was something out of a fantasy novel, but these were events I actually experienced firsthand. Yes, I really did fight a dragon for 3 hours, but it was all done through the lens of live-action role-playing. You see, I was never really good with social interactions. I think it's because I don't read social cues well. So you can imagine how stressful it was during my first semester at my university, given that I didn't know anyone coming in. But I was lucky enough to find the perfect place where I could thrive socially during my first month there. And that place was the Live Action Role-Playing Club, or LARP Club for short. If you aren't familiar with LARP, it's an activity where people create fantasy characters and portray them, often by wearing elaborate costumes, within a fictional world. Or putting it another way, it's the adult version of children's make-believe, with less parental supervision and more hitting each other with foam weapons. But it wasn't until the start of this pandemic, when I had a chance to look back on all the experiences I'd had, that I realized how much I really gained from my time in LARP, and how much it helped me become the person I am today. So I wanted to share that with you all, in hopes that maybe it could help someone just like it helped me. What made LARP so beneficial in helping me in my social life was the ability to create a character of my own. And on top of that, it was the ability to interact with the characters other people had created. When I first joined LARP, I created a character named Juan. And Juan was made based on the ideas of what I thought a kind person would be. He wasn't showboaty, he didn't seek attention, he just wanted to help people. For example, rather than taking a class of swinging swords or fleeing fireballs, I took an enchanter class, who would be able to make his allies stronger and enemies easier to take down. I wouldn't get many big moments in the spotlight myself, but I would be able to help others create incredible memories they otherwise might not have. And the reason I created a character like that is because that was the kind of person I wanted to be. Those were my ideals. I want to be the person who people can count on to have a shoulder they can lean on, or that can help them finish a project they really need to get done. So while Juan may be an elven mage from a fantasy land of monsters and magic, his personality mirrored much of my own. And it's that aspect of role-playing, the creating a character with parts of yourself that being so integral to helping me make friends through LARP. Because when I first joined, there were over a dozen members in the club already who attended the bi-weekly meetings they had. And I didn't know any of them. And normally that'd be incredibly anxiety-provoking for me. Because whenever I go into a situation like that, I worry I'm going to say the wrong thing and then make someone offended. Or I'm going to do something which will ostracize myself. But I didn't really need to worry about that in this case, because I realized they weren't interacting with me. They were interacting with Juan. Having that separation between myself and my character helped ease the anxiety I would normally be feeling. And so, over that first semester, I was able to get to know people in the club through their characters using the facade of my own. One of the characters I had a chance to meet was named Roslina. Now, Roslina was very similar to Juan in a lot of ways. She, too, was a supportive character who casted healing magic from the backline. And she also, like Juan, had a deep fascination with the magic they casted. They had a love of research. So, the two quickly became very good friends. And over time, I began to wonder about the person playing Roslina underneath the costume. Up until that point, I hadn't attended any of the after-club meetings where people would go and talk about what happened during the club session out of their character. I was afraid that people wouldn't like me as much as they liked Juan. But Roslina was different. Our connection felt so real. I decided to take a risk. So, after one club session, I went up and I talked with her. And a funny thing happened. Our interactions out of the game mirrored our interactions within the game. The same personality traits I had that wanted to be a good, helpful person that led me to create Juan the way I did were the same kind of things she had that made her create Roslina. And so, in no time at all, we got along great. And today, even today, she is still one of my best friends here at college. We still talk regularly. Our similar real-life personalities led us to create similar characters. And our relationship mirrored the one our characters had. And it didn't stop there. After talking with Roslina, I began to open up a bit more and talked with more people. And the more people who got along with Juan, the more I realized that I got along with those people as myself. I had made a ton of great friends without even knowing it. I think why that occurred boils down mostly to the creative process that goes into creating a character. Role-playing as someone you create from scratch is very different from, say, role-playing someone from a script. With a pre-written role, you have a foundation to fall back on whenever something happens. If there's a set mishap, or someone flubs a line, then you have the writing already done for you to get yourself back on track. You have that foundation, that backstory, already supplied for you. Role-playing as a character you create isn't like that. There's no script. If someone asks for your character's opinion, you need to be able to come up with the answer from some place within yourself. So a lot of people draw upon their own personal experiences and ideals to supply that foundation. Let me give you an example. I knew one character in the club who had two different characters, but the characters were drastically different. And that amazed me because I was having trouble coming up with different characters on my own. So I asked her about it. After one club session, I went up and I asked, hey, how do you play characters who are so different from each other? What's your secret? And what she told me was that the two characters were basically different aspects of herself personified. One character had been made based on how she saw herself in good ways, her confidence, her strong personality. And the other character, the one she had created second, was based on the character traits that she viewed negatively. her insecurities, her getting distracted. I was blown away by this. Whether or not she intended it, this club member had created 2 different characters which would allow me to interact with both sides of that person. It was an incredible experience. But on the opposite end, it's really, really difficult to play a character who's unlike yourself. To give an example, over this pandemic, I got engaged in text roleplay. You might think that's easier because, it's just typing. During a session, I was playing as my character Natari, who was fighting some monsters. During the roleplay, my character was angry, so I decided to experiment a bit. I wanted Natari to fight the monsters and perform some graphic acts against them because of his rage. Immediately after having done that, I hated it. I decided it wasn't something I wanted to do. Because I realized that wasn't something I felt comfortable with. I'm not the kind of person who gets really aggressive and violent when he gets angry. So even if I just wanted to write down that my character did that, I couldn't get into it. It felt wrong. And that's important because it shows that any character we create has a piece of ourselves inside of them. You can't create something from nothing. And that's where the whole point of this becomes clear. Before I joined LARP, before I started role-playing at all, I was always told one piece of advice when it came to conquering my social anxiety. Be yourself. We've probably all heard this classic gem of wisdom before. It's been a part of human knowledge for who knows how long. But I think people don't understand that sometimes being yourself is exactly when I felt the most insecure. I was afraid of who I was. I didn't really like the person deep down. I was afraid other people wouldn't either. But I didn't feel that way at all during my time in LARP. Because once I started to get to know the characters, I realized I wasn't worried that people wouldn't like me. Because after all, Juan was just me, through the lens of fantasy. And that's when I realized the solution. The solution to all the social anxiety that I've been feeling. If I was uncomfortable being me around people, I could just be a character who was like me. A character who had my personality but lacked those elements I was afraid to show to the world. Someone who didn't have my incessant need to worry about what other people think about them. And you know what? It worked. This philosophy of interacting through people using a character helped me overcome much of my social anxiety. And that right there is why I wanted to give this talk. So that I could reach out to other people out there who are in a similar situation to the one I was in. Because there's a stigma against hiding who you are in today's culture. But I want to prove that that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. It can be a difficult process for a lot of people to try and love themselves, especially if they suffer from severe self-doubt like I did. But there's an alternative, one which benefits both sides, that I wanted to share, one I learned through LARP. If you're scared to go out into the world and be yourself, find a role to immerse yourself in, one that you do feel comfortable playing, and one that is like yourself. Because no matter what character you create, they'll draw from who you are. So whoever you decide to roleplay will still have aspects of who you are as a person deep down. But in the same time, you'll have a shield to protect you against that feeling of being exposed to the world. And over time, as you become more comfortable, you can add to that personality. Your persona can gain more aspects of who you are. It starts out bare bones, but becomes more advanced. And eventually, before you know it, you'll basically be playing your real self as a character. You'll have become comfortable in your own skin without even realizing it. That's what happened to me. And then I want to talk about the people out there who are comfortable with themselves. Because I know it might seem scary, this idea that people you're talking to aren't really the person they say they are. That isn't the real picture. But it doesn't need to be a bad thing. Rather than trying to discern what lies underneath the facade, instead, take a second and get to know the person you're speaking with. Get to know them in their character. You might realize you're getting to know them more than you had originally thought. After all, everyone has elements of themselves they only show in certain situations. This is really no different. When I first decided to give this talk, I wanted to make sure that there was an outlet for people who didn't have a way of making new friends in this world. For people who were scared to really get to know other people. Because the world is a scary place. But saying hi to someone and making new friends should not be something that gives people so much fear. Everyone has something in them that is unique. And if you're scared to bring that out, I hope that this is giving you a way to maybe show that uniqueness in a way that makes you feel comfortable. And before I go, I want to leave you with this. When you walk out of here today, ask yourself, who is the you that you're going to introduce to the next person you meet? Thank you.